The following is a text exchange which occurred between brothers on July 31st, 2021. 7:47 p.m.
There lived a certain man in Russia long ago. He was big and strong, and his eyes a flaming glow. Rah, rah, Rasputin, lover of the Russian queen. Have you heard Boney M sing Rasputin?
Nope, let me check it out. Whoa, Boney M had some energy.
Word.
I was just looking into it further, and apparently Boney M is not the name of the person. It's a group for which the Bouncy fellow was the frontman. Coincidentally, he died on the same date and in the same city as Grigori Rasputin, who was the subject of the song you had me listen to.
Coincidence? I think not.
I had never heard of Boney M.
I had.
There's some pretty good comments about them under the YouTube video. 0% autotune, 0% twerking, 5% drugs, 10% hair, 85% hopping. I like that one. There's another one that says 100% drugs and 100% hopping, which seems accurate. And finally, the other one I just read said, I want this played at my funeral, or I ain't going.
I like that.
In other news, I just saw a commercial for a truck where the guy tells his cat to go and get firewood, and the cat runs off to do it. The world can be disappointing at times, but not at times like this.
Waldenses beware! Feline Inquisition now comes with its own firewood.
Straight from the heartland, this is Things I Text My Brother. Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of Things I Text My Brother, a series of conversations which have taken place between the brothers Drouillard on subjects spanning the neighborhood and the globe, which will hopefully leave you smarter, kinder, and better looking. Today we're going to jump off from that dramatic reading that you just heard and discuss the topics therein. Maybe we'll talk about bone music, maybe we'll talk about hemophilia, maybe we'll talk about Josh Groban, Pythagoras, temporary insanity, the Romanovs, the Sans-Culottes, or Russia's greatest love machine. But we haven't plotted our exact course because we want you to join us on that journey. That's how it works on Things I Text My Brother. I'm Jeff. This is Brad. Let's talk about our texts. But before we hop back into that text exchange, just like Bobby Farrell of Boney M would have hopped around in his silver dancing pants, we need to take a look back, because it's always important to make time to cleanse ourselves of our past sins and to continue our boundless quest for self-improvement through worthless information. Thus it's time for Ablutions and Edification. Well, Brother Brad, I have some edification today, but I believe you have an ablution. What do you have for us?
Well, this is starting to become a pattern. I seem to have a lot of ablutions. I'm going to have to start looking for things that you do wrong instead of just looking for things that I do wrong, because I'm going to get a complex.
Good luck.
Yeah. At some point in episode 22, Johnny Applesweed and News Right Fresh from Heaven.
Ooh, a fantastic episode, don't you agree?
I do agree. You asked if I had ever driven on Refugee Road here in Columbus, Ohio. I said, I have drove on Refugee Road.
You spoke incorrectly.
I did. Obviously, that should have stated, I have driven on Refugee Road. Unacceptable, but admitting my mistake and telling the truth will maybe set me free.
All right, well, I have a little bit of edification.
Ooh, what are we talking about?
This comes from episode 15, which was Anthems and the Evaporation of Our Enemies. Do you recall that episode?
It was a really good episode, I believe. What do you think?
It was. I think it was fantastic. During that episode, somehow we got to talking about General Santa Anna and his wooden leg.
Yes.
We talked about his wooden leg being displayed in a museum in Illinois, or you also talked about his actual leg being buried with military honors, because presumably before he had a wooden leg, he had a real leg. I think that's the order that would have gone in.
Usually.
I mentioned, without giving any further detail, that I actually knew of somebody else's leg who was on display, but I didn't mention who that somebody else was. Are you familiar with Dan Sickles?
No, unless he was a general in the Civil War from New York.
You do know these things.
Did he also help build Central Park?
He did have some involvement in that.
I do know who Dan Sickles is.
He was a wealthy New Yorker. He happens to be known for being the first person in the United States to successfully use a plea of temporary insanity because just outside the White House in Lafayette Square, he killed his wife's lover in 1859.
I actually knew that.
But eventually, he's fighting in the Battle of Gettysburg. I believe it was a cannonball taking off his leg. He had to have it amputated in a field hospital right above the knee. Now, he ends up winning the Medal of Honor because he does command his troops. He gets back on the horse and commands his troops after his injury, so kind of brave, but he commanded his troops by leading them into an untenable position without the authority to do so from his higher-ups, and he basically gets many people in his unit slaughtered in the 3rd Corps of the United States Army. It's a terrible move, but Dan Sickles is well connected. He fills political roles later in life, and he tells anybody who will listen that he was one of the heroes in stopping Longstreet's movements that day, which he did slow Longstreet down. He just did it without the authority to do so and at a cost that probably wasn't warranted. In the mind of Dan Sickles, he's a hero, but that's mostly because he's well connected. But the leg story, that's really what I wanted to get to.
Yeah.
Because he did keep his leg after it was amputated. He actually sent it to the Army Medical Museum, as it was known at the time, which now exists as the National Museum of Health and Medicine. And he was known to visit his leg often and actually bring guests there all the time to show off his leg. Well, Mark Twain was one of Dan Sickles' guests. And I really love a quote that Mark Twain gave about visiting Dan Sickles' leg with Dan Sickles. I noticed then what I had noticed once before, 4 or 5 months ago, that the general valued his lost leg way above the one that is left. I'm perfectly sure that if he had to part with either of them, he would part with the one that he's got. Dan Sickles was much prouder of the leg that was, on display than the one that was still attached to his body in a meaningful way. That's my edification to fill in the gaps from episode 15 about whose leg, in addition to General Santa Anna's, is also on display.
Yeah, Dan Sickles, he's worth reading about if you haven't.
Mm-hmm.
His Excelsior Brigade that he was in charge of from New York, he was all about like athletics and running in a time when you didn't exercise just for fun. And they wore those Zouave uniforms that had like harem pants.
Yeah.
Like for a little while, he was dressing them up in these harem pants.
Yeah.
It's just a fascinating guy.
Spoiler, we might hear about those types of pants again in this episode. Well, Brother Brad, you've performed your ablutions because you keep messing up. I've continued to provide edification for our listeners. We're ready to move on. Now that we've been cleansed and edified, it's our tradition to let you start things off. Where are we headed?
I wasn't going to address the cat part of the conversation at all, frankly, because I'm not a big fan of cats. But since it was in there, I feel like I should at least acknowledge it, so I'm going to start here. There are, unsurprisingly, many, many images and stories out there on the internets about cats with jobs. And I found myself largely uninterested. I thought I was going to like it because you were talking about a cat who was collecting firewood. I said, oh, cats with jobs. Dogs with jobs are cool. Cats with jobs are just like, meh. They're just cats dressed up doing weird things. I did go down a bit of a rabbit hole reading about a cat named Browser, which was first fired from and then reinstated to its job as pest control or mousekeeper at a library. This library was in White Settlement, Texas. It is so called because it was the only settlement of non-Native Americans in that part of Texas at one point. But I'll leave any judgment of the name behind. I did want to note that the current mayor, as of today's recording, his name is Ron White.
Oh.
Because of course it is. But now for the best part of the text. So talking about Boney M and all that dancing. Over the years, you have sent me many a video of music groups from around the world doing dances of all kinds.
Yeah.
If you were to pick one video on the internet of people dancing that you like, what would it be and why?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting question that you pose. I think that if I had more time, I would probably come up with a number of answers, but some of my more recent answers for this question would have been generated by the Eurovision Song Contest. There was a group from the Ukraine in one of the recent years that had a song called Shum, which is actually based on folk stories, but there was some excellent dancing. It was clear that they said, let's wait until there's a day that looks foggy and apocalyptic. Let's put on a bunch of cheap hazmat-type suits. Let's wear masks. And let's let one guy really dance, and the other people will just kind of move back and forth. And that one is in the front of my mind.
So what do you want to talk about? Where do you want to take us?
Well, I did look up a little bit about the group Boney M and just what they're about. They actually have some ties to Milli Vanilli, which was certainly a prime group during parts of our childhood. Girl, you know it's true. The link between the two is that there was a producer named Frank Farian who put together this group called Boney M just because he created that name. He liked the sound of it. He's like,
It's a good name.
Boney M. But he basically recorded some music himself and decided to tour it, he would need some people. So he found some people to tour it. A few women with Caribbean background. Bobby Farrell was from Aruba. He was an exotic dancer previously. And he basically just forms them as the face of this group that goes around touring. But they get big really quickly. Bobby Farrell goes around doing insane dancing. Everybody should go and watch the video of Rasputin by Boney M right now if they want to see some pretty incredible dancing. They'll see this man with some cool hair in some shiny silver dancing pants. They're not quite Hammer Pants, MC Hammer Pants, because they don't have that drop crotch.
GP, are you with me?
GP, Are You With Me is not MC Hammer, which is the reason I cut it out of the other episode when you said it. GP, Are You With Me is Kurt Franklin.
Is it?
Yeah, GP, Are You With Me?
Oh, man.
But anyway, so they're not Hammer Pants. They're clearly based on the type of pants, and I actually want to go into pants a little bit later on with Harem Pants, the Turkish trousers, Hammer Pants. There's a family of pants that he's wearing in the video, and just like the original text said, it is definitely 100% hopping. But to achieve 100% hopping at the Sopot Festival, which was basically like a Polish version of Eurovision in 1979 is when this edition of it took place. The most common video that people will find has something like 275 million likes since being posted in 2015. But it's from this festival in 1979. And in that, you will see the other singers, 3 main singers that were actually a part of the group, some backup singers as well. But they're standing there, they're singing beautifully, and Bobby is just dancing around, hopping, hopping, hopping. There have to be drugs involved, because to achieve the level of hopping he did, I saw another YouTube comment that I liked today. It basically said, if this guy had a wireless microphone, he'd have already crossed the Atlantic twice, because he just bounces around constantly.
It's fantastic. You're underselling it, in fact. It's fantastic.
Not to mention the fact that this song, called Rasputin, is basically giving a biography of the years that we're most typically talking about with Grigori Rasputin, which is his involvement with the Romanovs, potentially his more intimate involvement with Alexandra and the scandal that would have been involved in that. But basically this song is declaring Rasputin to be this fiery-eyed ladies' man who does some scandalous things, but the ladies like and the royal family thought he was a healer, and then he dies and blah, blah, blah. It's not a 100% accurate story, but we're sitting here doing a podcast where we probably get about half it wrong every time. So I'm not here to criticize the song that was put together by Frank Farian for Boney M to go around and sing.
His whole rise from being super poor, and he was not real religious and kind of rambunctious as a kid, possibly, but nobody really knows. And then he becomes this cult leader, a cultist, and he moves into the Russian royal family through their inner circle.
Mm-hmm.
It all ties back to Queen Victoria, which I find fascinating, because Queen Victoria passed on what was known as the royal curse, better known as hemophilia.
Yeah.
It's passed on by women, but is only shown in men. So besides having all of these male royals that started to have hemophilia, Queen Victoria basically had family members that were sitting in power in Germany, Russia, Romania, Yugoslavia, Greece, Spain, Belgium, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, all these places, all getting ready to fight World War I against each other in some various formats, which was part of what brought down the Romanovs, plus hemophilia, which brought Rasputin into the royal family, which also kind of brought down the Romanovs. So really, it's Queen Victoria's fault that the Romanovs went down.
But to Moscow chicks, he was such a lovely deer.
Yeah, that whole thing with hemophilia and Alexei, the Tsarevich.
The boy he was helping.
Yeah. The Tsarevich he was helping. His big moment was he was suffering from some swelling and some internal bruising and hemorrhaging, and he was just about dead, Alexei. And basically, Alexandra talked to Rasputin, and he said, keep the doctors away, don't let them go in, he's going to be fine. Just let him be. Well, it ends up that probably did save Alexei, but not for the reasons that Rasputin thought. Basically, they were giving him aspirin because it was kind of a new thing at the time. And aspirin, in fact, thins the blood, which for hemophiliac is a terrible thing, but they didn't know it. So they were giving him aspirin, which was making his pain worse to try to help his pain. And so Rasputin did kind of save Alexei because of this. Kind of fits with the whole thing about occultists in that there's the fine line between the craziness and mysticism that they have and real fact. And I saw this quote. I was looking up famous occultists, and I saw this quote about Roger Bacon. It said, medieval English philosopher who is alternately considered a wizard or early proponent of the scientific method.
Interesting.
His wizardry was actually possibly science-based, but people didn't understand the science, so he has an occultist view around him historically. And so that's kind of what happened with Rasputin.
Yeah.
Rasputin, he kind of helped Alexei without knowing it. So was it mysticism? Was it the scientific method? Did he know something?
Yeah, it's a fine line. I mean, some people considered him a monk. Some people considered him a mystic. Boney M apparently considered him to be Russia's greatest love machine, as the song implies. So he wore a lot of hats. And he probably actually wore a hat because he was born in Siberia.
Speaking of occultists, I also saw that Pythagoras of the Pythagorean theorem in math was considered an occultist because he influenced esotericism, but not while he was alive. Do you have a favorite mystic or occultist, and is it Emanuel Swedenborg?
No, I do not have a favorite.
Oh, that's disappointing.
Generally speaking, I stay away from wizards.
You're a wizard, Harry.
I don't want your wife to get angry at me for misunderstanding her wizard friends.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Well, going back to that YouTube song comment that I saw about him crossing the ocean if he didn't have a wireless mic, which, by the way, I should mention, Bobby Farrell was not actually performing. I shouldn't say he wasn't performing. He was performing like a maniac, and he earned his spot on the stage for sure.
Right.
But he wasn't singing. It was usually Frank Farian, that guy who put the group together. But his dancing was made infinitely harder because he was using a microphone that had a cord on it, which would have been the only choice, I'm sure. But he wasn't singing anyway, so why not just expand the illusion to having a cordless microphone? And who knows what Bobby Farrell could have done then. But anyway, that all goes back to that YouTube comment of what he could have done if he didn't have a wireless mic. So I started to look up, I wanted to find other great YouTube comments about songs. And I had trouble narrowing it down quite to that focus, so I cherry-picked some comments from a BuzzFeed article called 26 YouTube Comments That Will Actually Make You Laugh, and I tried to pick out some of the music-related ones.
Okay.
Are you familiar with Josh Groban's song, You Raise Me Up? You raise me up so I can be Josh Groban. I don't know what it actually says.
Can't say that I am, and that didn't really make me want to listen to it.
Yeah, well, it's that kind of song. One of my favorite YouTube quotes about that one was from somebody named Luminous YT who said, I played this song at my hamster's funeral, which I enjoyed that quite a bit.
Are you sure that wasn't written by AI?
No, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of Hilary Duff?
I have heard of Hilary Duff. She has beer named after her in The Simpsons, right?
That's correct. I once saw a Cosmopolitan magazine cover in a grocery store, and it said, Hilary Duff is back and kicking ass.
Oh.
And I posted way back then on my own Facebook or whatever I had at the time. I said, I've often asked myself, when is Hilary Duff coming back? And when she does, will she be kicking ass? But at that time, she apparently was. It seems that at some point, Hilary Duff released a song called Someone's Watching Over Me. And I briefly watched the music video today, and I was thinking, wow, this music video looks very poorly produced. And one of my favorite comments about that one on YouTube said, awesome song, but was this video filmed with a calculator? Which I liked. Have you heard of someone called Adele?
Yes, I have heard of Adele.
Hello? Well, somebody under Adele's video of Hello said, I used to be a fan, but now I'm an air conditioner. Yeah.
I had on my answering machine when I first graduated college a message that said, Brad is not home right now, and the answering machine is on vacation, but this is the refrigerator, and I will post a note to myself and let him know you called.
Nice. Very nice. Well, the last one I have, I just liked. A person posted a video called the 3-cheese pizza blend recipe, tips for making pizza. And the first comment that I saw under the tips for making pizza said, not clear, burnt down my house and married a goat.
That's a bit far. But still had their computer, so that's good.
Yeah. Then I was looking into some other things. I wanted to see what other directions I could go. I did a lyric search for songs containing the lyrics of Rasputin, which yielded 159 search results, but as I cycled through them, most of them seemed to be covers or other versions of the Boney M song, Rasputin. There was a song called Fantastic Life by an English punk rock band called The Fall, and that one only was about Rasputin in passing, because during that song, there was a lyric that said, "The Siberian Mushroom Santa was in fact Rasputin's brother." Do you know anything about the Siberian Mushroom Santa?
No, if it isn't Krampus, I got nothing.
No? Well, he's Rasputin's brother. Not to be confused with Did Moroz, which we talked about in our Christmas episode, the Hallmark Christmas episode in Soviet Santa.
While we're talking about music in Russia, or related to Russia, I suppose.
Yep.
Boney M was not Russian, but they did sing about Rasputin. Rasputin? Rasputin?
Rasputin.
Rasputin?
Well, I'm sure it's pronounced all different ways. But we should reinforce that Bobby Farrell did pass away in St. Petersburg, just as Rasputin did on the 30th of December. So there is a definite Russian connection. And I watched a delightful video of Boney M getting off a plane to go to Red Square and perform a concert in 1978, during which the song Rasputin was not allowed to be played. But then when they went to the festival that I viewed on YouTube, the video that you sent me, I mentioned that was from Poland's essentially Eurovision thing, and they weren't supposed to play Rasputin at that event either. When it aired the following day, Rasputin had been edited out, but the people of Poland got to hear it on the live radio broadcast back at the Sopot Festival of 1979. But anyway, I took you well off track.
No, actually, that was a nice segue. But before I go into that segue, I wanted to just say, you said that Bobby Farrell died just like Rasputin in the same manner, because Rasputin's death was amazingly scary. They thought they poisoned him with cake and alcohol, but apparently the poison never got in there. So they thought, man, this guy has taken enough poison. He should be dead many times over, and he's still kicking.
Yeah.
So they took him to the basement and said, hey, look at that big cross over there, Grigori Rasputin. And when he turned around, they shot him in the chest. Oh. And then they left him on the floor in the basement thinking he's dead. Went to his apartment with one of them dressed like Rasputin to make it look like he came home so they wouldn't get killed. They go back and go down in the basement. The guy who shot him goes down in the basement. Rasputin leaps up and attacks him.
Nice.
And runs out of the house. So they run out of the house and chase him, shoot him a couple more times, hit him with some stuff, then threw him in a freezing river. So that's not how Bobby Farrell died?
No, now that you mention the details, I'm recalling that Bobby Farrell actually died from some heart-related conditions that he was having a few hours after a performance. So same day of the year, but many years apart, and not the same circumstances.
You did talk about music in Russia being banned.
Yeah, censored, yeah.
And that took me a different way. I had never heard of this. Have you heard of bone music before?
Is that the one that you don't use air to make sounds?
No. So bone music. They had banned most Western music and music from Russian emigres and defectors. And basically in Russia, you couldn't listen to that stuff. Mm-hmm. But, true to any place where something's banned, people want to partake of the thing that's banned. That's universal, right?
Yep.
So they found a way to make recording machines relatively easily. They could make recording machines that could take music and make it. But it was really hard to get vinyl in Russia at the time. And you couldn't just kind of go to the store and buy a bunch of vinyl and be like, hey, I want some vinyl. What do you want it for? Because they kind of asked. And you couldn't say, I'm going to make some bootleg records.
Oh.
So in order to use their recording machines and make music, they would go to hospitals and get discarded x-ray plates from the garbage outside the hospitals because they had a law or rule in Russian hospitals that you had to throw away x-rays for privacy. So they used these x-rays and they would cut them, the lines for the music, and then cut the x-rays into shapes of records, round things. But they had all these really cool x-ray images on them.
Oh, that is
So they had skulls and ribs and shoulder bones, pelvises. So they called them bone music.
Huh. Those have to be collectible, right?
They are. You can go on eBay and buy some. And there's people making them again. X-ray audio was the other name for them. Or bone music.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I really liked that. But I hadn't heard of that before. But one of our great listeners, Eric Neeb, has, and I mentioned this to him that I was going to talk about it. And he's very much into music and records. And I wondered if he had heard of it. And he had.
So Eric Neeb, a classic listener, don't you think?
He is one of our best.
One of the best. Between him and the people in Bhutan, we have everybody.
Yeah.
We just don't have anybody on our blood donation team.
Yeah. So where else are you going to take us?
Well, there's really just one more major area that I was curious about. We've mentioned that Bobby Farrell was dancing around in some big baggy pants. I say pants in the American sense, not in the British sense of underpants. To me, Boney M singing the song Rasputin in the late 70s, that's a great moment in pants history. But are there other great moments in pants history?
I'm thinking that the way you set this up, that there are, in fact, in your mind, other great moments in pants history.
Yeah, so there are a few different articles on the subject. I'm not trying to do a comprehensive list or tell people all of the history of leg coverings that we know as pants. You can get into the different bloomers and you can get into everything. You can get into the fact that the earliest pants we have on record seem to be from at least 3,000 years ago in what would be Western China. Basically, these wide crotch, straight leg horse riding pants. A lot of the earliest pants were made for riding on horses. But did you know that when Joan of Arc was captured, she was not tried by a war tribunal, she was actually tried by an Inquisition tribunal, which meant that they were first trying to convict her on things like sorcery and heresy.
Right.
But do you know what they actually ended up being able to successfully convict her on?
She wore men's clothes.
She wore men's clothes. So she was wearing pants, and she was wearing pants in part because it made it harder for the male guards and other people to attack her. So she had reason to be wearing pants just for her own safety, not to mention the advantages you would have when fighting and all of that.
That seems right.
But yeah, she was actually condemned for wearing pants. She wasn't the only French great, well, that's not really a great moment in pants history. That's a tragic moment with Jeanne d'Arc. But this next one is actually kind of a tragic moment, so I shouldn't say great moments. Important moments in pants history.
The important history of pants.
Do you know about in the French Revolution, the Sans-Culottes?
Sans-Culottes. Yep. People who fought without pants.
Yeah, so that's the literal translation is basically without breeches.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they weren't wearing any pants, although the bourgeois people were basically saying that. They were mocking them by saying, oh, you don't have breeches, which was working in a couple different ways. It was pretending like they didn't have any pants. What they were really saying would have been, oh, you poor people, because the sans-culottes were the lower class, or at least not the upper class. They were wearing full-length trousers as compared to the knee-length, often silk breeches that would have been worn by the wealthy folks, not the Third Estate.
Mm-hmm.
These people wearing their long trousers, they became the radical face of the French Revolution around the early 1790s. And it was that group who was at the forefront of events like storming the Bastille and butchering the royal governor and the minister there. It was the women of the Sans-Culottes who led a large march out to Versailles to bring the king back to Paris, where the king would have to face the people and see what was going on. So the Sans-Culottes, that name comes from the type of pants that they were wearing. I think most Americans are familiar with another great moment in pants history. Certainly one that has impacted me greatly would be the invention of blue jeans, which wasn't so much the invention of denim. It was when Jacob Davis and Levi Strauss patented in 1873 metal rivets onto denim pants, thus making work pants, what they would have called waist overalls at the time, much stronger and able to hold up to the type of work. I wear jeans. I like that. But more directly related to Boney M would be this genre of pants which existed in Middle Eastern cultures for a long time, started to appear in Western culture, or started to be accepted in Western culture during the early 1900s with, frankly, what would have been kind of an exploitive name, the Harem Pants. They were known by other names as well, Turkish trousers, all these different things. But the Harem Pants, these big baggy pants by whatever name, parachute pants, they come into focus in the early 1900s. And then by the late 1980s, you have some guys thinking, hey bro, we need some good lifting pants. And do you know what they came up with in the late 1980s?
They came up with cut-off jean shorts.
Two of these guys who wanted weightlifting to be more comfortable came up with Zubaz pants.
Zubaz!
Do you remember the crazy pattern Zubaz pants?
I remember the Zubaz pants.
Well, they've had a few peaks and valleys, but they came into vogue in the early 1990s. And many years later, if there is any official leg covering of American parking lot fashion when the temperature is below 20 degrees Fahrenheit, it would have to be the Zubaz pants. The Buffalo Bills fans are known for wearing them more than anybody as they smash people into tables and stuff out in the parking lot. But there was one very famous character wearing, I would say, a variation of those Turkish trousers. We know him as MC Hammer, and his connection to Boney M seems very obvious to me because MC Hammer, before he even became MC Hammer, would have been at the clubs and the discos in the late 1970s as groups like Boney M were prominent. And he realized that if he had these multiply pleated pants, they would react. He would make his movement, and then there would be this flare of activity that made his dancing even more noticeable. So MC Hammer figures that out in the 1970s. By the end of the 1980s, he's created his large drop crotch trousers. It's all just to promote more movement for hip-hop dancing and whatever dancing he had, that little tippy-toe dancing that he ended up doing. And many people would have called his pants parachute pants, but MC Hammer made it very clear he detests the term parachute pants, so don't you dare call him that. They tend to be known as Hammer Pants, and maybe they'll come back someday. I don't know. Ryan Gosling, I actually saw a clip of him on some Canadian kind of version of Star Search when he was young. He was dancing in a silvery pair of what looked very much like MC Hammer Pants, so he thinks that they should come back too. I haven't seen whether he's sported them in more recent years to help bring them back.
I feel like Dan Sickles would not have chosen to wear Zouave pants as part of his military dress today if they were more related to MC Hammer, because he was very much into the military, the Algerian military folks that these are named after.
Yeah.
So now I know
the important history of pants.
Well, Brother Brad, we talked about a lot of things, but there's one man we haven't heard from yet. He's never fallen under the sway of any sort of mystic, fiery-eyed or otherwise. But he is a man who is an established wearer of pants. His name is Father Art, and we're going to ask him some questions.
what is the coolest pair of pants you have ever owned?
Well, I had some flared bell bottoms that were pretty sweet at one time.
What color?
They were sort of a brownish tan, and I had two-tone brown saddle shoes to go with them.
So what role did disco actually play in your life then?
None.
None.
I was already past my prime when disco came into existence.
Now that you have seen a clip of Boney M performing Rasputin, who would win a dance battle between Roberto Ferro and Russian mystic Grigori Rasputin? Please assume that both men are alive, at their prime, and have had time to practice their routine.
Obviously Rasputin, because all Russian men can do classic dances.
If you were to write a song celebrating another famous mystic besides Rasputin, which mystic would you choose and why?
I'm not big on mystics. They kind of scare me. I would probably go with a magician, maybe.
Ooh, a magician.
Yeah.
Which magician? Who's your favorite magician?
Well, Houdini.
Who is your favorite dancer of all time?
I'd like to say somebody classy like Baryshnikov, but probably not. Patrick Swayze.
Patrick Swayze
is as good as I get. Yeah.
Roberto Ferro had a unique performance style. One modern YouTube commenter recently declared that Ferro's dance moves consisted of 5% drugs, 10% hair, and 85% hopping. If someone were to summarize your dancing at your physical prime in a similar manner, what categories and percentages do you feel would best be assigned to you?
5% foot movement, 95% swaying.
Well, folks, now that we've heard from Father Art, it means that our time together is coming to an end for this episode. We've said just about everything we're prepared to say about Grigori Rasputin, Milli Vanilli, Queen Victoria and the Royal Curse, Eurovision, Wizards, the Occult, and Eric Neve. But fear not, just as soon as we can dig back into the archives and find another gem of a text exchange, there will be another episode coming your way. In the meantime, you can head over to our Instagram page at Things I Text My Brother Podcast to drop us a note about what you liked, what you didn't like, or to tell us about something we got totally wrong. You might even have enough time to go tell a friend, an enemy, and a total stranger to give us a listen as well. If you manage to do any of that, the fraternity of Drouillards will be forever grateful. But most importantly, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
It's Pythagoras.
Okay. Maybe we'll talk about bone music. Maybe we'll talk about hemophilia. Maybe we'll talk about Josh Groban, Pythagoras. Did I get it right?
No.
What is it?
Pythagoras. You're saying Pythagoras.
Pythagoras. Nah. While we're saying things that people should do, you have the chance to become the second member of our American Red Cross blood donation team. We are currently in 31,000th place out of 50,000 teams, and we're right there with the Walkers of West Park, Bailey Middle School, and somebody named Lizardo. So we're in a tie with them based on our one team member donating, I don't know how much blood, but I would love for one of our listeners to become our second blood donor. For the Things I Text My Brother podcast, just go on the American Red Cross site and join our team.
I would become the second one, but I'm still not ready to go out in public. And public's really not ready for me either.
That's all right.